Welcome, everyone. We're here at RSA 2020. I am with my good friend, Mr. Corey Bodzin. He is the VP of Product Management?
Product Management
at ExtraHop. See, I told you that the title was too long.
Head of Product works too.
There you go. So Corey and I work together at Tenable, so it's nice to catch up and talk about ExtraHop and a topic that I love talking about, IoT, of course.
Yeah, this is a good time. I think the last time we got together, I got to heckle you at a container talk at Black Hat, which was very good, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I've built a lot more containers since then.
Yeah?
So, yeah, we're, a lot of container stuff I've been doing. Anyway.
It's a fantastic thing, right? A lot of people ask. Containers, I used to get a lot of questions about it, get a lot more about IoT now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I was talking to you about my enchanting quadrants, where I break down basically indicators of compromise into 4 areas, right? That being network, endpoint, logs, and threat intelligence. When we talk about IoT, it's really the network is the one that helps you. I mean, I've done a lot of stuff with IoT, like endpoint stuff. I mean, it gets weird because you're dealing with different chipsets. Logging is not great on IoT devices if it's there, if it actually works.
That's right.
Threat intelligence doesn't really so much apply to helping you with IoT, maybe a little bit, but the network is really where it's at for IoT.
The network is really where it's at. I mean, this, we see this all the time. Obviously, it's a little self-serving for me, but every enterprise has devices where, they wish they were logging, but they weren't. They wish they had an endpoint agent. But IoT is interesting because really the logs, the agents, they're not an option. And you still need to see what's going on there. And, we've seen a lot of stuff in the news recently with devices that wouldn't be eligible for agents or logging that misbehave. And you need some sort of way to see what they're doing and figure out if they are misbehaving.
Yeah, and the network is definitely the best place to do that. And the level of visibility you need isn't, it's not all that much. We were just talking earlier, like just looking at the connection information in the headers is usually enough to say, why is it making all these connections out to this one host and all of the different ways you analyze that data, right?
That's right. So enterprise IoT, which is different than consumer, right? Consumer IoT, smart bulbs and TVs, they don't ever consider security as far as I can tell. Enterprise IoT, they at least think about a little bit, but, they don't prioritize it. The priority is on ease of use or on cost or things like that. And so we're very fortunate that most of the stuff is still doing fairly insecure things using plain text protocols, et cetera. But even without that.
The insecurity helps the security.
The insecurity helps the security. It does help. It's a shortcut to visibility.
Right.
I would greatly prefer, of course, that the IoT vendors got a little smarter and did some things more securely. But even then, to your point, there's a wealth of information we can get about, here is a Polycom phone, and it looks like all the rest of your Polycom phones, except this one's now starting to talk to different systems than the rest of them do, or it's got interactive login traffic going to it, or things like that. Interactive login traffic doesn't take a lot of skill to look at that and go, what is happening with my Polycom?
Why is someone using Telnet to access my camera?
That's absolutely right. But there's a lot of rich information in there, and so we think it's really important, and it's. It's an area that attackers have noticed is there's a foot in the door. You were telling me the story about taking pictures of things remotely. And
I compromise. Sometimes there's no authentication on them. Sometimes it's an easily guessable password.
That's right.
Now you're looking at through the lens of the camera in the conference room, and I'm zooming in on things, trying to read passwords off a whiteboard and on the papers on the table.
It really, people normally start with like the movie plot things of, hey, somebody's going to, compromise my video conferencing system and listen in on my boardroom meetings, which is important.
Yep.
But you may also have smart boards that have, your next quarter's roadmap plans written on them. And when you hit that button on the smart board to send out those plans to save on a file share, that's just as important IP, and it's the kind of thing that you need to make sure you're securing.
I think one of the differences in hearing talk about IoT between the consumer end and the enterprise end is you have a profile for IoT devices as they're supposed to work in the enterprise, right? Whereas in the home, it's kind of like willy-nilly. Devices do different things, and users have different behaviors, and it's harder to profile a device.
It is, but this is one of the things where, especially if you have, like ExtraHop does, if you have a good data science team, if you have access to enough data and the right algorithms, you can start to build a behavior profile of what's normal. Right. One of the things I like is that an IP phone tends to look like an IP phone. They all tend to do the same things, and so you can kind of categorize a group of normal with Cisco versus Polycom versus what have you. They're all going to have their own nuances, and being able to refine and even know, hey, Polycoms do this thing that Cisco doesn't normally do. That's important to know too. But for a lot of your security practices, knowing that something's in a peer group that's IP phones, and IP phones don't talk to corporate databases. So anytime you see that happening, something worth investigating, that's good data to have. And it takes a little bit of data and a little bit of effort to figure it out. You don't just get an off the shelf of here's what normal looks like, but it is more straightforward with enterprise devices to profile them like that than, say, consumer.
You just give me an idea, because one of the things that we'll do as attackers, right, is upload custom firmware, right? If you're looking at all of the network traffic and what's normal, you could probably tell me that, like, hey, normally this firmware update comes from Polycom's IP address space. Yesterday it came from China. Why? That's not normal, right? So looking at where the firmware updates come from, and now that I think about it, is a perfect application, I think, for Extra. I'm assuming that you...
Looking where the firmware updates, and of course, if you have threat intelligence and you can say this is known bad domain, known bad IPs, great.
Yep.
But even, again, the more prosaic, just setting up the peer group of, hey, Polycom seem to always update. They get their updates on Sundays. And here's one that's updating on Tuesday. That's unusual. It's outside the normal peer group behavior. And this is the kind of thing we've been doing for years, is setting up a notion of what's normal and what's not normal and calling it out. And IoT is really ripe for this. And as you said at the beginning, right, network tends to be the only way you're going to get that kind of identification of something strange is happening here.
Right, absolutely. I notice a lot of devices support APIs. And that's another interesting area of normalization, right? Because from what I've seen, the devices use the APIs in very specific ways to function, to report back. As an attacker, my usage of the API is drastically different, right?
That's right.
That would stick out.
That's exactly the same, kind of, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but again, there's a normal usage behavior that you can see and you can understand. They make a couple of calls, they move a handful of bytes, they see a thing that's happening, whereas if there's activity where they're making repeated calls, it could be a security problem. It could just be, could be a maintenance problem that you need to go figure out. But it's nonetheless unusual. Pushing larger data volumes, unusual, and the kind of thing that, as an analyst, I want to know. Doesn't mean it's something I have to tackle right away, but it might be something that's going to make my list of things to investigate. Yeah.
One of the challenges today, of course, is getting a good asset list of what's on your network. IoT devices also, we work for them, right?
Yeah.
IoT devices are particularly problematic because they can fall over in a scan. They are often difficult to fingerprint because there's so many different versions of that device, right? There's lots of challenges in just finding, and anyone can go take this small little device and plug it into the network, right? You didn't see a shipment being made, or you just plug it in and there it is. So how do we today do a better job of discovering our IoT devices on the network?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And you and I do remember, right, at Tenable, it's kind of a running joke, is when I saw a device that said it was Linux or in F5, it probably meant it was IoT, because that just happened. That's what Nessus can do with an active probe, figuring out, okay, that's the best I can guess about this. But IoT devices tend to be fairly chatty. They send out things on protocols like MDNS or such, and there's a lot of good data in there. There's information about, here's, I'm a Samsung Galaxy Note 7 running Android blah. And if you know how to look at that data and deconstruct it, if you're positioned in the network in a place where you see that sort of data, then it's really easy for you to call out not just, hey, here's IoT, but here's manufacturer, here's model, here's some other information on these things that is all in that, chatty traffic that's occurring.
It's awesome because there's a series of protocols that are all mostly broadcast-based traffic that you wouldn't even need a span port to see it. But there was an open source project that was using that to fingerprint the network.
That's right.
And so your team has obviously thought of that as well and gone, that's a great way to learn about IoT in your environment.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of great, they're great open source projects. There's a lot of protocols you can look at. As I mentioned, MDNS. DHCP is great if you have a centralized DHCP environment. When things ask for IP addresses, they tend to be fairly verbose about what they are. You can parse that data out. There's internet printing protocol. There's all sorts of protocols that, when you're somebody like ExtraHop and we're good at 60, 70 different protocols that we can parse, then you can look in at that data and you can find out a lot. And it helps you not just get that inventory of everything that's there, but then we can also use it to help us establish, okay, here's what normal may look like, or here's what the peer group should look like for these things.
Right. And also telling me if that device should be on the network or not.
Well, there is that too, right? I mean, that's, when you're a Polycom shop and then all of a sudden a handful of Cisco voice over IP phones show up, it makes you wonder. Doesn't mean there's a problem again, but it means there's something you might want to look at. Yeah. There is always, as you know, there's security, there's responding to actual attacks and events, and then there are the things that are, I don't know if the term hygiene is right, but it feels like the right one, where it's stuff that's maybe not a problem, but it's not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it's worth looking at to figure out what happened there and why.
Can you automatically take actions? I know there are some remediation kind of steps, but can I take an action if I find a new IoT device to go move it into a different network through integrations?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things we're really proud of at ExtraHop is our ability to integrate. We have a lot of easy ways to programmatically or automatically get the data out and talk to a Palo Alto to put it into a quarantine group, talk to Cisco ICE, do other blocking with whatever infrastructure you have. You always have to be cautious, right? I remember my first experience with a Cisco NetRanger in the late 90s shunning my corporate DNS because I had misconfigured it. So
that brings back memories, Corey.
Yeah, right. Not good ones for me. But so it's one of those things of we think it's really important to equip people with all the information to feel confident about being able to investigate and understand. But then absolutely a lot of customers, when they get that level of comfort, the next thing they want to do is automate so that they can remediate at machine speed.
Even if you can get to the point where you get in every morning and maybe there's a ticket or maybe you just go into the console and it says, hey, here are the 5 new IoT devices that I saw on the network, and you can go, yeah, move those over here. But this one I want to investigate, so don't move it or whatever the case may be. Right?
That's absolutely right. And that's, the ability to not only find things, but then catalog them, make it useful for you to actually see, here are the new things, here's what it's been doing, let you assign labels, put it in groups. That all workflow bit, that's just as important in enterprise IoT as it is in things like traditional infrastructure. You got to know what you have so that you can secure it.
Yeah, and I really, and John Strain has the, I believe the famous quote that your interface looks so good I want to lick it. But the more I've seen of the product, your interface is really slick, and I think that's really important. We don't always see that in software in general, right? Not even just security. In software in general, we don't see really, truly good interfaces.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. That was one of the things that initially attracted me to ExtraHop is, I mean, it's a gorgeous interface with all the requisite pew-pews and dark modes. But it's also an incredibly functional interface that does really make it easy to see and understand what you're doing. I'll give shout-outs to Creighton, Brooke, and Mike, our UX team. They are fantastic and have really put design thinking first in our product. I think it shows.
Awesome. I want to make sure we send people to the right places, Corey. Try RevealX Cloud for free.
Absolutely.
securityweekly.com/ExtraHop to get more of the interviews that we've done. We catalog them there, and to get the ExtraHop RevealX Cloud for free.
RevealX Cloud for free. We think it's a fantastic step into giving visibility into your native cloud environments, and hope people try it out.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Corey.
All right. Thank you, Paul. It's been a blast.